So these kids tend to respond best when there are what we call flexible groupings of students, or at the very least, thoughtful grouping of students. So in other words, they do better when there are kids with different speeds. So we don't want to put all the slow kids, I don't mean slow cognitively, again, time-wise, in one group and all the faster kids, that all kids tend to benefit from when there are different speeds because they all have something to contribute. Especially when we're talking about different projects or different expertise, that's something to really consider in classrooms and even in project-oriented things. More specific strategies, having a second set of textbooks to keep at home so they don't have to remember, even when they're getting their locker in 6th grade, like, what do I need to bring home? Because they're not thinking like that. You know, they have 2 minutes to catch the bus. That's a time suck for them, basically. They don't need to spend their time when they have to just remember even to bring home their coat, for example, as opposed to, I need social studies, I need English, I need that. Keep additional papers to a minimum, which is problematic because kids don't even have many textbooks anymore. So these kids, I find that as schools have changed from one textbook for social studies, one for English, now it's like lots of papers, lots of papers, lots of papers. It's actually slowed these kids down. Another reason why I think maybe they're having more problems. Like I talked about before, the availability of technology to limit handwriting, facilitate homework transfer from home to school. One website for all homework. Now, I don't know how common this is in this area of the country. In the Boston area, teachers all have their own websites. So if you're in middle school or high school, you may have 7 different websites that you have to check at night. That a lot of school systems haven't caught up with the idea that one sort of place to get everything is the way to go, either because they don't have the funding for it or it's just not a priority. So these kids are having to check, okay, my English teacher, you know, they're in 10th grade, needs this, my history teacher needs that, and they're checking everybody's homework, it's a disaster for these kids. Even though you'd think it would make things faster, it really doesn't. It's really tough for them. Another thing that helps them a lot is to have a model of the finished product of the assignment, so they can sort of see, okay, what is it that it needs to look like? So I can start thinking ahead, okay, this is what it looks like. It doesn't matter what kind of assignment it is or what kind of goal you have. Even if it's not school related, here's our goal for your behavior. Here's what it would look like if you did X, Y, and Z at the end of this year. Here's what we're shooting for. Keeping that in mind is really important in terms of helping them develop a time frame too. Associated with that, kind of the beginning and the end point, where am I starting? Where am I ending up? Homework that's not redundant, I already talked about that, and worksheets that aren't visually overwhelming and confusing. Reducing the need for multitasking and providing help with note-taking is something that really, for any kid, out of all the things that I've mentioned, probably the one thing that every single kid benefits from who has this problem is help with note-taking. They just cannot take notes in a way that is fluent, in a way that's going to help them. So they take notes, they're graded on their notes in some classes, they're not good at that, and then they're tested on those notes that they didn't even get the information that they need down. So giving them the information that they need so they can actually study well is important. In terms of social situations, I think, do I have like a few more minutes, right? Okay. In terms of social situations, simplifying social situations and providing guidance, allowing more time to process, limiting the number of social interactions, and teaching appropriate ways to ask for clarification, even for their peers, to be able to say, oh, wait a minute, what were the rules for that game again? Can you just say that one more time? That sort of thing, being able to clarify in social situations, in peer situations. Being able to scaffold for them. So I said give them more time, limit the number. That doesn't mean that they just need one-on-one, but if there's a lot going on in a classroom or in an environment or in some kind of setting, being able to limit how many different permutations they have to do is helpful. Making sure they focus on the person who's talking. So teaching them, actually, you need to look at that person. You need to, process what it is they're saying, because looking at them will definitely help them process that information more quickly. Of course, modeling appropriate behaviors too. And then providing support organizationally in the communication in the social realm, helping them organize their thoughts, helping them organize kind of their ability to process what happened in a particular social situation, and helping them understand, okay, when you're in this kind of a group setting, here's the stuff you really need to pay attention to, and here's the stuff you don't. And these are all things that they can learn, but don't necessarily come naturally to them, especially as time goes on, as social situations get more complicated. And I kind of said this already, helping the child to notice when social situations start to feel complicated, rather than putting pressure on him to keep up the pace, help them be more conscious of what's going on and to learn to observe, to learn to slow down. Also to recognize when the situation is becoming emotionally challenging for them, or emotionally hot, basically, because that's going to slow us down. When we get sort of anxious, or when things get like, oh my gosh, I wonder what's going on here, we tend to sort of slow down. So recognizing that, and so they can shift to more kind of calm environment to know that, okay, I just need to kind of let go here and be able to withdraw when that's a possibility. Also preparing them in advance. So if you know there's a situation coming up, it's going to be fast-paced, they're going to have to move really quickly, being able to sort of say, here's what to expect. And here's the things that you might not expect but might happen. And then having friends and adults nearby to provide prompts to facilitate communication. Oftentimes these kids sometimes have a best friend who's like the fast kid in the classroom. And so being able to pair them up with those kinds of kids is a good thing. Opposites do kind of attract. So basically, in sum, what we don't know about processing speed is more than what we do know, at least from a research-based perspective, but we're learning more all the time. It's a very multidimensional kind of concept, very complicated, and it has an effect on social, emotional, and academic functioning. So I think I'll stop right there, and I have, I think, 10 minutes for questions, if you guys have it, or...
Has there been any research on looking at the association between this issue and fetal alcohol?
No, that's a good question. And he said, is there any research that's been done on fetal alcohol exposure and processing speed? There isn't. Now, we can kind of glean that there's higher rates of ADHD, higher rates of other kinds of cognitive processes that are expected to have this kind of presentation, but no research that I'm aware of, although I would expect that it would be in much higher rates than the general population, or even just kids with just learning disabilities. It's hard for us to do that research because we don't have a lot of kids with fetal alcohol syndrome that are at least identified as that. And I find that unless you're really working in the kind of clinic where that's a big portion of your population, people don't really want to diagnose it. So I think that's what makes it hard for us to look at that question, but we've wondered about it actually.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll walk over here.
No, I was just in the front. I didn't and it just kind of made me about a particular client, and she is, when she is on something, she is incredibly fast. And so, I mean, she does improv and is able to be so quick, and then yet she can't eat because she can't decide what to eat, cook the meal between the dishes. And like she'll excel at like one thing, but then everything else falls apart. So is that like step shifting and flexibility issue?
It is. I also think that what speeds people up in that's a great example, because what speeds them up is probably the emotional, the electrical kind of charge that comes from I am on, and I'm in front of this, and now I'm going to use that so we tend to be quicker when we're emotionally engaged in a positive way. Okay. So that I hear this all the time, that my child is so slow, or they sit down at dinner time and they're like, or breakfast. What do you want for breakfast? It's either Pop-Tarts or Cheerios. It's just that's it. But they can, but yeah, you put them in certain situations, and I hear this all the time. But what tends to be the issue is that kind of like, they're on. They can and it's limited. They're totally focused, so everything else is just
Yeah.
They don't have to process anything other than what's going on in that kind of moment.
Yeah.
But there is this kind of paradox that doesn't seem to explain.
It's like she'll be able to do all of her homework, but if she does all of her homework, she won't shower or feed herself.
Yeah.
And if
Yeah.
she's showering and feeding herself, then she can't do anything else.
Yeah, yeah. So in that case, that's also there's only so much that she can process. So it's homework, homework, homework.
Yeah.
But yeah.
I just want to, I'm not sure if this is a question. I work with authors, from 0 to 3-4-year-old, and I promise you that I see a lot of this in them, but because they're not school age, there's no diagnosis.
I know.
So can you provide information or any advice as to what parents need to do before they start school to help them out?
I think one of the things they need to do is to help their kids structure their world as best they can. Even a 2-year-old can use help at structuring their world. I think also to kind of prepare the parents to get an evaluation at some point in time. You know, I'm reluctant to diagnose any child with anything like ADHD before the age of 4 or 5, even though you can. There's so much development, but you're exactly right on. Remember I said that if we look backwards at these kids, a third of them showed slower motor speed, needed occupational therapy or physical therapy, and in those early evals showed problems with motor speed. So those probably are markers for these kinds of kids. So I think being able to help them structure their world, help them in those kinds of social situations process what it is that they just saw, like, oh, Billy took your truck, or you took Billy's truck, or that sort of thing, and really give words to what they're not able to actually quickly put words to. And then kind of prepping the parents that, you know, at some point it would be really good to kind of measure this where they are. And because parents are, you know, they hear evaluation, they think, oh my gosh, what's wrong? But being able to say, you know, it'd be really interesting to just get a better sense of where he is. And by 3 or 4, we actually can get a decent sense of, you know, where a child kind of falls on this. And sometimes occupational therapy is helpful in treating some of these early motor issues. So, yeah.
Conversely, I teach high school, and I will see this in juniors and seniors because I'm not diagnosed. And it's really frustrating because I see at least 200 parents a day in one of them, so,
It does. And you know, these kids do go undiagnosed because so much of it looks so behavioral and so like they just don't care. And so I think if you can get them to get an evaluation, that's probably the biggest thing you could do for them. It really is. And again, the research kind of shows that it's really helpful in terms of getting them to advocate. And even in job situations, knowing more about your profile helps you later on. One way to sort of pull these sophomores, juniors, and seniors in is to see if they can get extra support if they're going on to college. The colleges are actually great at implementing all of these things. I find colleges are better than elementary school, public schools, private schools. They just get this, and so you can go in with your testing from your public school or private eval, and they will just sit there and give you everything you've asked for. Oh, you need books on tape, you need this, you need extra time. So if that child is going on to high school, you can say, I found this to be just a great tool for kids like you to have, like getting a better sense of even what would be good majors for you, what good kind of careers, kind of using it that way, because it's hard sometimes to engage the older students because they don't see the value in it.